bio.
You're watching a modern day miracle.
Hey guys, it's Gunter here from Outdoorphoto. Thank you very much for joining us for this announcement of the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II. It is a phenomenal camera and we are looking forward to sharing the information that we went out to go and experience firsthand with this camera. Sony were kind enough to bring it through. We had our hands on it. We took it out into the field to go and test out in a couple of different areas. Obviously, depending on what exactly it is that you're looking at shooting, this camera pretty much covers all of it. The only problem that I've got with this camera, and literally one of two problems that I've got with this camera. One, let's get the problems out of the way. So let's go. Number one, file sizes. Obviously, if you're shooting 50.1 megapixels on this new back illuminated stacked sensor, it is going to give you big file sizes. That's not the problem. You're shooting at 30 frames per second, so that can fill up a memory card in no time. And what they've done is they've added a speed boost, which is a pretty practical thing. So you can actually activate the higher frame rates with a shortcut key to kind of just give you in that specific burst the maximum capacity or a setup capacity to 30 frames per second. And as soon as you let it go, it kind of just settles down again to a lower continuous shutter or frames per second. One of the big factors here is that you've got pre-continuous shooting as well. So once again, we've got the functionality where if you half press the shutter, it's basically going to start taking shots into a buffer. As soon as you press the shutter, it saves those images and all the images that you shoot whilst taking the shot, whilst pressing the shutter button in. As soon as you let go of the shutter button, it's back to normal. The key factor here is Sony have managed to put that on a custom function button. So you can program it when you want that function and when you don't want that function. But what does 30 frames per second help you if the camera can't stay in focus or your focusing system just isn't there? Well, Alpha 1, 2 solved that problem. This camera's focusing system is incredible. It is immaculate. I'll show you some of the images that I took on this. It just sticks. It performs like I have never seen another Sony perform. With the launch of the A5 or the A7R5, the focusing system on that outperformed, in my opinion, the focusing system on the A1. But you had a lot less frames per second. You had the megapixels, but you didn't have the frames per second. Electronic shutter became a problem on that one. But the readout speed on this sensor specifically really outperforms it. So we took it out and we went to go and test out, because if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you're shooting on electronic shutter. If you're shooting on electronic shutter distortion becomes a problem. Problem? A1 Mark II? No problem. So we headed out to the field. We took our resident lapis out, tested it out in a couple of different ways, and these are the results that we got. So just to run you through the specs of what this camera actually entails. It's a BIONZ XR processor, the backed illuminated stacked sensor, 758 phase detection focus points. The focusing really is incredible. The other issue is that with this camera, they give you a USB-C dual battery charger. I mean, what's the problem with that? That's pretty incredible. That's amazing. Thank you for finally bringing out a mirrorless camera with dual battery chargers. I don't know who buys a camera these days without a spare battery, but now you have to go and fill it. Only got one slot and it's why? No problem. Alpha 1 Mark II. Dual battery USB-C charger. So here's my problem with it. I used probably 7 different charging blocks. The camera that was dropped off, charger, strap, and camera. That's it. That's all I got. I didn't get a manual. I got to play and dig through everything myself to figure out what's happening in this camera. And unfortunately, there wasn't much information. There wasn't a charging block with the charger, and it just didn't charge off of any USB-C that I had. There was a specific charger that I eventually found that it charged through that port, so I managed to charge the batteries and I ducked out got a stack of images. When I say a stack of images, I've selected a handful of shots out of the plethora of images that I shot. It's a lot. This camera really produces a lot. We tested it out with a 70-200. We tested it out in studio situations with the 85. Unfortunately, still the old 85. Man, I'd love to get my hands on the new 85. Incredible lens from Sony. We tested it out with a 50mm 1.2 just to double check that depth of field and how quick and accurate the eye tracking is. Found a little niggle with the eye tracking where it actually picks up an eye that's hidden behind hair. So it obviously reads the algorithm of a person's face and makes a prediction of it, which actually, and I'll show you some of the images, were not that accurate. Where we switched around, you go into the menu, you switch it, and it actually, you give it a priority. You tell it you want left eye or right eye, and boom, it hits it, no problem. Again, studio work, megapixels, yes, great. Dynamic range, amazing. The layout, the bulkiness of this camera, it doesn't feel the same. It feels like whoever designed the previous Sonys, it feels like that guy went on holiday and they left these cameras to some new designer in terms of the ergonomics of the camera. It just feels better. It feels well rounded out. It doesn't feel like that square block when Sony got into the game here in South Africa. One of the issues that I picked up, and it's not as big of an issue as the charging block, and the big issue I picked up in the studio was putting on a trigger onto the Sony. It kind of had issues picking up that it's shooting with a wireless flash. So you'd activate the flash protocol on it, but it just says no flash. And then you have to go and dig in a menu to go and find that exact spot where you tell it, listen, I'm shooting with a wireless flash. Here's the trigger, studio lights, boom, let's go. And as soon as we figured that out, we got the niggles out of the way, boom, no problem. Shot with the greatest of ease. I'm gonna come back to this whole focusing thing. 30 frames per second means nothing if your camera can't manage to keep focus. I ducked out to my boys' rugby practice, the closest sport or action that I could find. The skate park nearby was absolutely dead. But just trying to pick up on the focusing system, I played around with a couple of the different features and face tracking, and obviously the tracking system that this camera allows and offers. Had to play around and find my things, and I'll get to that in the conclusion because I do have an issue with the focus acquisition of the camera in terms of subject tracking. But if we have a look at this sequence, obviously a bit of rugby, rug and tug, picking up, driving through, pick up and go. I eventually used this specific tracking system with a small spot, got it on my subject. But as soon as it's on the subject, it just doesn't fail. If I head out here and I go and have a look at the sequence of images, remember 30 frames per second, this entire sequence and everything is absolutely spot on. We had one that ducked out there. Here we go, 1, 2 shots, boom, back in frame, back on tracking, no problem. Just loved it. This is another example that I've got of the tracking system. So I picked up on this little guy with a blue shirt. His name is Nick. Nick got in focus. He crossed past somebody else. And the focusing system stuck on the subject that I selected. And it actually just followed it instead of coming forwards to the subject that was the foreground. And it just, even with him digging in and his face going in behind the subject, no problem whatsoever. And I just love these sequences because you can just keep it down and it just goes and 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 goes. Man, the frame rate on this is insane. At 50 frames or 50 megapixels, it is incredible. Now, if you go and read on the stats, the battery life is about 420 frames per second, which I wanted to call, because that's not the truth. I shot well over 1,000 shots on this battery without having any issues. It is incredible. The biggest issue that I've got is that these specs are usually written in specific scenarios. So if you've got everything activated and you've got a worst case scenario, you should be able to get out 420 frames per battery. It uses the FZ100 battery, which I love because after a couple of different integrations or iterations, I have to go and look that word up, but after a couple of different bodies, we actually ended up in a situation where you had a couple of batteries, and depending on which camera you've got, you'd need a specific battery. Sony have gone with one stock standard battery. It's the FZ100 battery. It fits into the majority of their cameras. It's a great battery and it works like a machine. And out of the battery life that I experienced in this, no problem. Now let's talk about tracking specifically. When you're dealing with something that's coming straight towards you, that is obviously the most difficult focusing system or focusing method for a camera. This is my son just absolutely bolting it out straight towards me. All of these shots perfectly in focus. I mean, you probably wouldn't be too happy when this rocks up at his 21st someday, but hey, it's shooting at 8K video, 30 frames per second. You've got all the other options lower down. You can shoot 4K at 120 frames per second with this video. But that's not the coolest video functionality on this camera. I think one of the coolest features that they've actually added onto this camera is that you've got animal detection. So subject detection on the previous cameras used to be people. That's it. It's pretty much it. That's all you've got. Now with this, you've also got animal. Now in terms of it tracking an animal and staying on it, no problem. When we went out to a golf range nearby, we actually set up and there were these little swallows swooping past, trying to focus on them time and time and time and again. And that's kind of the one niggle that I picked up. It just doesn't seem to acquire that bird focusing as quick. I could probably have spent some more time and removed the other animal priorities and just keep to bird. The one time it actually snapped on, it did not disappoint. So looking at that, I mean, at that distance and that speed, there we go. Boom, in focus immediately. When it picked it up, man, did it pick it up. Where the other cameras have kind of had this slow focusing, it's just like they haven't quite hit it. With this, they've hit it. And the frustration of this is it's becoming more and more difficult to buy a bad camera. If you are out in the field and you're trying to get specific shots, almost all of these brands now have options that should meet your needs. When you're shooting Sony, there is not a better camera in Sony's range that I can recommend right now other than the A1 Mark II. But I mean, it is incredible with the focusing speed and tracking capability of this. Yes, some cameras offer a solution where if you point it in that direction, it's going to find that bird quicker, it's going to snap onto it, and it's going to stick onto it. Pre-capture, bonus. The speed boost, I think, is actually a very cool thing. Because if you're going to be shooting in 30 frames per second the entire time, you are going to need 256 gig cards and higher. This camera, dual memory card slots, and what I love about it is that they've gone with that versatile slots that they've got again. You can either put in CF Express Type A or you can switch to an SD. Both slots can take either or. They can't both take both because then you're sitting with 4 cards. That's just silly. Don't go there. What is it? No, don't go there, don't go there. Let's just take a second to talk about the memory cards as well. So Sony have, with this AI processing unit that it's got in this camera, the Sony CF Express Type A or the Sony TUF or Sony SD cards. If you slot those into the camera, it actually uses a section of the buffer or a section of the memory card as part of the buffer. So it extends the buffer, which I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. So it's writing to the memory card, but it's not saving to the memory card until you press the shutter, then it saves, and then it's a little bit confusing, but it gives you a bigger buffer when you're using Sony memory cards. So I don't know exactly where the logic is or how that works, but it works. Get yourself some Sony cards. The Sony TUF cards are incredible. Just don't put them in the wrong way around. You will break your camera instead of the cards. Those things are exactly what the name says. They are tough. Another cool thing about the Sony pre-capture You can actually set it up in specific intervals, so anything from 0.3 seconds to 1 second. Now let's talk about this electronic shutter in this camera. Electronic shutter has this horrible thing, and I keep on trying to explain to people, and I have to go and do this every single time. I have to electronic shutter distortion. You go to images, and I can go and demonstrate to people or show people what the problem is. It's for fast rotating things. If you're panning fast, if you're moving, it creates problems. If you're panning fast on the wrong camera, your electronic shutter will give you uprights which are not upright, they're diagonal. It distorts your image, it creates problems. With this sensor, we tested it out, and we specifically wanted to go and test it out and seek the exact problem. So, once again, our resident lapis swinging a golf club. I'm going to go through these quickly, and then I'm going to come back to them and come and scrutinize them properly. So, looking at this, we've obviously, good grief, look at those guns. Okay, any case, so we took our lapis out, and we specifically went to go and shoot this to go and test out and look at the problems. So I'm going to run through this entire sequence. So if we have a look at these images, I'm going to scroll through them as quick as possible. We're going through this entire sequence, and boom, great form. And there we go. So I'm going to reverse this a little bit. Boom. Now if we get to this section here, you see that golf club isn't straight anymore. The electronic shutter distortion is going to distort fast rotating subjects. In my mind, I like physics. I like how things work, and it just makes logical sense to me that club is supposed to be bending backwards. After consulting with a couple of people, it turns out in your rotation of a golf swing, because you're decelerating and pushing through at that specific section, the golf club starts leading past the stem, and that actually creates that bend, which means this isn't distorted because of the electronic electronic shutter. This is distorted because lapis is swinging the hell out of it. Is the electronic shutter distortion a problem? No. If you want the global shutter, you're looking at a 24 megapixel in the A9 III. We're going to go out and do a test on that and exactly where that fits into the market. But this is the ultimate Alpha 1 Mark II. This is what you want. It ticks all the boxes, all of them, except that charging, the subject tracking, and how the versatility of that works. It's now available in the video as mentioned. So if you go out and you're busy shooting video or you're busy shooting wildlife, the shortcut key is there to quickly take a video. And because you're shooting wildlife, it'll actually track the bird. You don't have to go back to a fixed focus point and then you have to keep it on the subject just to keep it in focus. This just smashes it out of the park. So in a quick run, we took it out into a studio scenario. These are, once again, all these images are available in the description below. I'm going to load up some of the images that I have edited, but all the original images, and I'll show some of the images here, these are the original, straight out of camera images. The link in the description as well will have all these images on in RAW and in JPEG, so please don't take my word for everything. I honestly can't tell you why you should shoot mechanical anymore. Not on these cameras, not on any of these flagship cameras that are available in the market at the moment. I mean, all of them, the one brand completely ditched their mechanical shutter. The camera actually doesn't even have a mechanical shutter in it. With this, again, same thing, man. If you're buying one of these, put it on an electronic shutter, get out there and get the versatility that functionality offers you and just smash it. This does it. Again, looking at the image quality in terms of the focusing, that kind of became a problem. So shooting very shallow depth of field, I kind of have a thing where if you're shooting on a 50mm 1.2 or a 85 1.4 and you're shooting that very, very shallow depth of field, trying to get a moody kind of image in terms of portraits, you're going to be focusing on one eye. If her face is slightly tilted to the other side, then the other eye is going to be out of focus. So one is in focus, one is out of focus because of the focusing distance. Easy out on that, hang the hair over one of the eyes. It kind of just hides that eye, doesn't distract from the one eye being out of focus. Obviously the alternative is just don't shoot at wide open apertures. But in terms of this, that eye is just not sharp 100%. And looking at the different images, it kept on trying to focus on this eye. So it indicated with its, on the screen, it indicated that it keeps on looking for this eye on the left hand, on her right hand side. And the focus kept on dwindling here at the back, and I just didn't manage to hit it. And as soon as I struck it across in the menu, it actually smashed it out of the park. As soon as I told it, listen, I want focus to be on the right, on her left eye, right, left, army, left, right eye. As soon as I switched it in the menus, boom, no problem. It focused on the left eye, her left eye, and we didn't have any issues with that. Guys, I am truly impressed by this camera. I can highly recommend, if you are looking at top-end performance with the best megapixels, with a focusing system that's actually going to stay on track, this is it. Guys, my name is Gunther. I'm here from Outdoorphoto. Thank you very much for checking out this review. Get into contact with the go-to guys in the shop. Get online, outdoorphoto.co.za, and then alternatively, visit the shop. We'd love to have you here. We'd love to see you here. We look forward to bringing you more of this content. Check it out. Cheers.